Galileo once said, "I've grown too fond of the stars to be fearful of the night." But although the night sky is beautiful, it doesn't erase the fact that nighttime is also cover for a lot of sinister things. As humans, we possess the ability to look past the dark tunnel and look towards the light at the end of the path. But before you reach the end, you must go through the dark, forcing us to rely on feelings instead of sight. They say that feelings can be your downfall, but if you can't foresee what's ahead, how do you ignore your heart? March 16th, 1999. The world would make way for Shani King. She would be born to parents Loretta Cook and Bobby King. The place she called home would be Milledgeville, Georgia. Growing up, Shani would be raised with two sisters, but also a host of aunts, uncles, and cousins. Early on in life, she was curious and charismatic, what some may refer to as a ball of energy. She was the child who could always be seen sporting a smile. Behind these photos of a young smiling child, I see someone destined for greatness. Behind her gentle smile and her loving heart was someone who was ready to take on the world. While in school, she would take up a number of extracurricular activities. She was a musician, playing the trumpet in band. She was also athletic, playing the sport of volleyball. Though she had gotten older, not much about her has changed. She was still the outgoing person who could place a smile upon your face if you were in need. In the year of 2017, Shani King would take her final steps down the hallways of Baldwin High School. She was now welcoming the journey of adulthood. After high school, Shani would decide to remain at home in Milledgeville, Georgia, where she would attend Georgia Military College, where she would further her education. As time does, it begins to fly by, and before you know it, it's 2022, and Shani is now 23 years old. Although she had worked a host of other jobs, by now she was a licensed insurance agent for the state of Georgia, where she would work at Geico Insurance, as well as direct auto insurance.
Good afternoon, this is Shani with Direct. Y'all come by, get y'all a quote, get y'all some candy. We also have some more stuff that you can get. So come see us today at 2592 North Columbia Street inside of Walmart. Hey!
Selling insurance was just a way for Shani to get by because she had other dreams. Aside from selling insurance, she also owned a couple of her own businesses. She was in the business of baked goods with Shani's Sensational Sweets. She also had Chanel's Cosmetic Smiles, where she performed a number of services with cosmetic dentistry. The reason behind her drive? Well, she had given birth to a son who had now become her entire world. At this age, her hobbies were spending time with her son, but also her family. She was both strong-willed and driven. She could still be seen everywhere sporting that smile of hers. But beneath that smile were problems. Shani King was a single mother, and the father of the child wasn't in his life. But although she had those problems, she managed to move on. She would even meet a guy who goes by the name of Rico, someone whom Shani would often brag about, stepping in and filling the role as a father. This was someone whom Shani had fallen head over heels for. In this moment of time, everything for Shani seems great. She even had more dreams. She wanted to travel and provide a better life for her son. But before these dreams could come to pass, a fork would be thrown in the road. To everyone's surprise, 2022 would be the last year that they ever saw her smiling face. A tragedy would strike that would not only claim her life, but it would turn everyone around her upside down. September 12th, 2022. On this evening, Shani King would be transported to the hospital by her boyfriend. Upon arrival, Shani was suffering from a gunshot wound. After arrival, medical personnel would work vigorously to save her life. But sadly, hours into her fight, she would be pronounced deceased inside of the emergency room. Meanwhile, her boyfriend is being interviewed by the authorities. The boyfriend who had brought her to the hospital. The authorities wanted to know exactly what transpired and why she showed up injured. While speaking with the officers, Rico would tell them that she had injured herself, that they were arguing, and in the midst of this, she discharged the weapon. During this interview, Rico was under the impression that she was still in the emergency room, fighting for her life. At this point, he doesn't know that she's passed, and that this is now an active homicide investigation. While he was being interrogated, little did he know, the officers were already rummaging through his home, looking for any type of clue that would lead to what happened. In the first interview, he would be questioned for a couple of hours, where he would maintain the story that she did it to herself. But hours into the investigation, he would be interviewed again. But in this interview, he would give a different story. He would tell the officers that it was a normal evening for them. They were sitting around the home as normal, just hanging out. But then he says there's a moment where his firearm was in his hand, and her son came inside of the room and he startled him. So when the son startled him, he accidentally discharged the weapon. He would explain that his reason for lying in the beginning was out of fear. He didn't want to go to jail for something he didn't mean to do. In this justice system that we uphold, it's innocent until proven guilty. So at that time, the officers had no choice but to take his word for it. But they would allow him to remain at headquarters while they further investigated the case. While further analyzing, Rico would continue to be questioned, and the authorities alleged that at one point, he confessed. 7 hours into the interrogation, he would be booked on charges of murder.
New tonight at 6, a Baldwin County man is in jail accused of killing a woman. Rico Stevens is charged with murder. The Baldwin County Sheriff's Office says that deputies responded to Atrium Health Navicent Baldwin on Monday, and that's where gunshot victim 23-year-old Shani King later died from her injury. The Sheriff's Office asked the GBI to investigate, and that led to Stevens' arrest.
Then, 31-year-old Rico Antoine Stevens would be transported to the local jail. There, he would sit and await his arraignment. But when he arrived, he would enter a plea of not guilty. The day in court for Rico Stevens wouldn't come quick. 2022 would come to a close, and then 2023, and he still wasn't in trial. But by 2024, he would finally have his day in court. As expected, the defense would show up and claim that he was innocent, and he should be cleared on all charges. Yes, all charges. The prosecutors decide to charge him with just about every murder count you can charge someone with. That way, they can ensure a conviction. Like normal, the defense would come out swinging, and they would attack the character of Shani. The defense, however, would paint a completely different story to the jury, and they would lay out the theory that Rico Antoine Stevens was no more than an abuser, someone who was short-tempered, who on that day made a conscious decision to take the life of Shani King. But along with the theory, they would also bring evidence from the crime scene, as well as evidence from his interrogation. Both the local authorities and GBI were present on the scene. While investigating, they would find the bullet that struck Shani lodged inside of a wall. The GBI would claim that due to the trajectory of the bullet, it was intentional. They would also make note that during the autopsy, the coroner would decide that whenever she was harmed, it was up close. When they compared the autopsy results with the GBI findings, they would come to the conclusion that when Shani King lost her life, the weapon was pointed straight at her. Over the days, the jury would also hear of testimony from family and friends. They would tell the jury that despite what was on social media that made them seem like a perfect couple, it was far from it. They would claim that Shani King suffered mental abuse as well as physical. They would also hear testimony that sometimes when they argued, Rico would pull out his weapon. But if hearing the tales of what truly transpired in that relationship wasn't enough, there was also a piece of evidence that was puzzling. The night that Rico was taken into custody, the officers had taken a firearm off of him, and he told them that the firearm that was in their possession was in fact the weapon that ended his girlfriend's life. And like clockwork, the GBI would put it to the test. But guess what? The weapon that was on him was not the weapon that was used. When confronted with this information, Rico was adamant that that was it, and that there was no other weapon. But just by luck, 35 days later, another weapon would be discovered. This weapon would be discovered behind the home of Shani King and Rico. They lived in a mobile home park, and if you're not familiar with those, people often cut through others' yards, to make shortcuts. Well, there was a passerby that just so happened to be making a cut through their yard when they looked over and realized that a firearm was laying behind the home. That passerby then decides to contact the authorities and report their findings. Ballistics then were able to successfully match the bullet that was lodged in the wall with the firearm found behind the home. After a laborious court proceeding, the defense would make their final remarks, as well as the prosecution, and the jury would be sent out to deliberate. With the evidence piled high, the prosecution was sure that they were in for a slam dunk. But when the jury went out to deliberate, that day would come to a close. And then, day 2. The jury is still deliberating. But guess what? No decision had been made. And then day 3, day 4, day 5, and by the 6th day, the jury still hadn't reached a verdict. By now, the prosecution is worried. And the defense, well, I guess they're sailing on clouds right now. And finally, on day 7, everyone would be called back to the courtroom because the jury had finally reached a verdict. In the case of then 34-year-old Rico Antoine Stevens, the jury would find him guilty on all charges. He would then be remanded into state custody for the remainder of his natural life. The case is now closed. The prosecution has received a guilty verdict. Prosecutors allege that on the night of September 12th of 2022, Rico Stevens and his girlfriend Shani King had begun arguing, and like times prior, he began to lose his head and draws his weapon. He then discharges once, where Shani would be struck in the neck region. At the time of the incident, the only people present in the home were Rico Stevens, Shani King, and her 17-month-old son. In a hurry and in a panic, Rico then grabs her 17-month-old son and places him in the car. He then goes back in and grabs his injured girlfriend and places her inside of the vehicle. Afterwards, he rushes them all to the hospital. Upon arrival, Shani King is unresponsive, but still alive at that point. While she's in a battle for her life, the family has now gotten word of what happened, so they're at the hospital now in care of her son. Meanwhile, Rico is at headquarters being interrogated, where he tells him the story first, that she did it to herself, and then he changes the story that the son startled him and it was a complete accident, and then he finally admits to it. Allegedly, the exact reason of why and what really happened on that night is still a mystery. Will Rico ever tell what truly happened? I don't know, because as of now, he's going through an appeal process. But although we may never have definitive answers as to what happened, there is answers as to what's to come. Her son will now be raised without his biological father, nor his biological mother. Her family will never enjoy that beautiful smile, and her goals and dreams that she once hoped to accomplish will now forever be a what if. Will this case forever be shrouded in mystery? Or will the family have the true answers that they desire? I guess only time will tell.
Time will say nothing but I told you so. Time only knows the price we have to pay. If I could tell you, I would let you know. If we should weep when clowns put on their show, if we should stumble when musicians play, time will say nothing, but I told you so. There are no fortunes to be told, although because I love you more than I can say, if I could tell you, I would let you know. The winds must come from somewhere when they blow. There must be reasons why the leaves decay. Time will say nothing, but I told you so. Perhaps the roses really want to grow. The vision seriously intends to stay. If I could tell you, I would let you know. Suppose all the lions get up and go, and all the brooks and soldiers run away. Will time say nothing but I told you so? If I could tell you, I would let you know.
What happened to 23-year-old Shani King was completely tragic. An all-around heartbreaking story. I really hope the final pages of her story will soon be written. Rest in peace, Shani King. Thank you for being a light for others.